Oh, let me tell you something. Busting makes me feel good.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Blockbusting, the podcast where we love to hate the movies. I'm your host, Jay Light. Joining me today, the impeccable Tom Whalen.
Impeccable. Never have I been called impeccable.
Today, I'm bringing it as a first, buddy.
Yeah, I love
Thanks for coming through.
Thank you for having me in Casa de Light.
It's a nice spot. I like this apartment a lot.
It's a good area, too. Mm-hmm. Walking distance from anywhere in West Hollywood you need to get. Not trying to give away where you live or anything, but you know. It's a beautiful place.
Thanks, man.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you came on to talk about a movie that I had not seen until you brought it up. Mm-hmm. And I'm really curious to hear why you hate it. This movie, Into the Wild.
This is one of those movies that I always am embarrassed to tell people I hate. You know what I mean? Because this is a universally loved film. You know, this is the type of movie that you talk to any 20-something and they're like, Into the Wild? That's why I do this. That's why I live this life. And so, but it's just, to me, it's so pandering. It's pretentious. Sean Penn, okay. Uh-huh. I don't like Sean Penn.
I mean, you're in the majority there. A lot of people also don't like Sean Penn. You think he's pretentious. You're kind of right.
Yes.
And yet, this movie, it feels... there's something about this movie that you're latching onto, and I think you're right to some regard.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's something deeper at play with you in the way you don't like this movie, Tom.
Maybe I have a repressed memory. Maybe someone bullied me while I was watching this movie. I don't know. But all I know is that every time I watch it, I can't help but just hate Supertramp, or what's his
Chris McCandless, Alexander Supertramp.
Because it's just this guy, he did have the life that I think 90% of people wish they had.
Right.
Loving parents.
Comes from money.
Went to a good school, graduated with honors, was good at what he did.
He's got a whole future ahead of him.
Yeah. This guy, he kind of, I'm not going to say he had life on a silver platter, but he definitely didn't have much to worry about.
Right. I'll say he had life on a silver platter.
Sure.
I mean, he had parents, even in the first couple scenes, you find out his parents are willing to pay for his, not only have they paid for his all undergrad education, at a school that's not a cheap school. He's going to Emory.
No.
And then he's going to go, they're like, we'll pay for if you want to go to Harvard Law School. Yeah, totally. We'll buy you a new car as a graduation present.
I mean, and I get it. So he had this revelation in his life where he was like, I want to struggle. I don't want everything to be so easy, right? But he's over there, he could just go fucking move to Wyoming, buy a little cabin, he doesn't have to do the extreme, just cutting his credit cards up and getting rid of his passport.
Burning his money.
It's why? Why are you doing this?
See, okay, it's interesting because this is what I thought might happen when you came on to talk about this. And by the way, if you haven't seen it, just a quick refresher for you. Into the Wild is a 2007 American biographical survival film, an adaptation of John Krakauer's nonfiction book from 1996. Follows Christopher McCandless as he travels across North America and into the Alaskan wilderness in the early 90s. Stars Emile Hirsch, Marcia Gay Harden, William Hurt, Jenna Malone, Catherine Keener, Vince Vaughn, Kristen Stewart, and the Academy Award-nominated Hal Holbrook.
Yes.
Now, this movie, and this is the thing that I watched the movie and I was like, this is probably going to be Tom's biggest gripe with the movie, is that Christopher McCandless is not a likable person.
Yes.
He's not a likable character. And that, I think, is, and I'm going to hit you hard on this one.
Okay, give me with it.
Why is having an unlikable character at your center of your movie, even as he travels through and does grow and has to and goes through this life that he chooses for himself and makes these really, I mean, it's a dumb decision. This movie is full of a character doing things and being so selfish and unaware of the way he affects the world around him. Why does that turn you off from this movie so much? Why does that, in your eyes, make this a bad movie?
Well, okay, so bad movie. I don't know if that makes it a bad movie, just that part.
Okay.
It's that when I'm watching it, I'm not getting any feelings of like, some movies will give me revelations about my life. Some movies will give me hope for things. Some movies will be warnings for me. So it's like this kid, he just goes out and with pure stupidity, and he's not likable because he doesn't think things through. He doesn't care about his parents. He doesn't care about his friends. He's just an uncaring guy. He's not really. I mean, I think he donated some of his money to.
He donated his life savings and not his leftover college fund to Oxfam.
I think why I hate him. I hate him, I guess, but I think why is because I wish I had what he had.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying? Where it's like, I'm out here, like, I'm sleeping on couches. I'm doing the whole, like, couch surfing, like, artist thing. I'm basically living the same life he set out to live. But what is he trying to accomplish? Was he going to write a book or something?
Yeah, he mentioned that he wanted to write a book about his travels. But the thing with this movie is it's really hard to watch this movie and feel anything but let me put this in a different way before I even say the other way I was going to say it.
Okay.
Christopher McCandless as a character is an interesting character to follow. I can see why his story has been told in a novel, and I can see why this movie has been made. And I think there's a lot of him going on this sort of soul-searching journey, but it's not really soul-searching. It's a very hollow thing that he's doing.
Yeah.
Because he's not doing it for really, it seems like, any other reason than just for the story of doing it.
Right. Exactly. No, and like the other thing is, it's just we're basically glorifying someone having a mental breakdown. Like, we all have like friends that have mental breakdowns and go do crazy shit. I probably moved out here on a mental breakdown. It's not good to like glorify someone doing something like this. So that's what I always disliked about the movie too.
Interesting. You bring I'm gonna tell you straight up. This podcast, this is gonna be a lot of disagreements between you and me on this podcast.
I'm sure.
I haven't had an episode quite like this where I watched this movie for the first time this morning.
Okay.
And I remember watching it and thinking, yeah, this is a good movie. I think that it's very surprisingly artfully directed.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of really good, the characters are great. I really enjoy the, I didn't know Vince Vaughn was in this movie.
Right.
I didn't know that character was going to like have an effect on me and have him be just like a grounded, like a guy who works as a combine farmer in South Dakota.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like it's hard to empathize with Christopher McCandless as a guy.
Yeah.
Because from the jump in the movie that he's making decisions on a level, and I'm not sure it's a mental breakdown.
You don't think so? You don't think that that's like, because he had everything. What was the catalyst to make him go, okay, I'm going to go throw everything I've ever worked for in my life away and just start new? What was that?
I think the catalyst is youthful foolishness. I think, and that's something that you have kind of touched on in the past couple minutes, which is there's a lot of people who sort of idolize what he did as like, oh yeah, I'd love to go do that thing. And Christopher McCandless, and far be it for me to say that he is the first person to do something like this. He's coming from a long story tradition, and especially in the kinds of people who he idolized, and the authors and stuff that he was quoting constantly, of being somebody who like, I'm going to go out into the wilderness and I'm going to go find myself in the wilderness.
Sure.
Which is, I mean, that's kind of a cool concept conceptually. But it's also hacky.
He's just not the type. It's been done. Exactly. He's not the type of guy I'd want to hang out with. Like, there's so much more shit you can find before you find yourself.
Right.
Like, you can go out and try stuff. And like, he went to LA and he was like, I don't like how the culture is and everything. Well, it's just like, if you really want to like learn about yourself, stay there. And you know what I mean? It's like he was always jumping around. He's just not the type of guy that I think is a good like example for, you know, who to have a movie about. It's just such an interesting story. That's the only reason why. Like, if he didn't die, would there be a story about this?
No.
You know what I mean?
But that's the thing.
Yeah.
The way this movie plays out, especially in the there's a, you know, I talk about this on the show sometimes, and there are scenes in movies that for me turn a movie from a good movie into a great movie. And I think for me, the scene that did this in Into the Wild is when he's at the sort of the very tail end of the story. And this, by the way, this is a really fucking long movie, and I usually don't like long movies. The thing's almost 2.5 hours long.
Yeah.
And I'm somebody who's notoriously against movies being longer than an hour and a half. I think you got to make a really special movie for it to be a movie that goes longer than that and still not only holds my attention, but keeps me engaged from a storytelling perspective. Right. And the way it's pulled off in this movie, at the near the very end, McCandless, Supertramp, whatever we want to call him, is hanging out with Hal Holbrook's character, this Army veteran who he has connected with, and he's talking to about, you know, they have their own different family troubles, and Alex Supertramp is this guy who voluntarily separated himself from his family. Yeah. And Hal Holbrook's character was taken, his family was taken from him. Yeah. And so they connect on this level, and there's the scene where he is starting, he's doing his laundry in the middle of the night so he can jet in the way that he has with every other group of people who have shown him any kind of love. Right. He's on the run because he thinks that that's the best thing to do. He doesn't realize the kind of impact and the trail of destruction that he's leaving behind.
Maybe this just reminds me too much of myself, Jay. Maybe I associate too hard with this, because it's like I feel like I should be laying down on this couch.
If you want to.
No, this is like a therapy session. It's just like I get how people can love this mentality he has and this, but it's just, to me, I don't know. It's so frustrating.
See, that's the thing. In that sequence of scenes, it starts out with him being in the laundry room at Hal Holbrook's house, and Hal Holbrook is like, I had a feeling that that you were going to miss our breakfast. I'm going to drive you 100 miles so at least you don't have to trudge through the desert, so you can catch a train or a plane or something to get you up to Alaska, or at least hitch a ride. And they get in the car, and one of the last scenes in the car is Hal Holbrook, and this is the Oscar scene. I remember this. Hal Holbrook saying to him, you know, I'm the last of my family line. How about I adopt you, and you can, and I'll be your grandfather or something. But I want that for you, right? And instead of doing the thing that would make sense to any rational person, Christopher McCandless does the arrogant young person thing and says, you know, we'll talk about that when I come back from Alaska, right? And Hal Holbrook knows he's not coming back from Alaska.
It's like a scary movie when, see, like in Scream, when they always say, like, I'll be right back. They never come back.
And that's the thing. That scene, those two scenes in tandem really hit me in a way that I did not expect, because it all comes into view at that point. You need the entire 2 hours and 15 minutes before that scene happens for that scene to have an impact the way it does. Right. Because you get to see him going through and basically fucking around and thinking he's getting some sort of philosophical growth from it. Yeah. And then by the end of it, you realize, oh, this was his moment to really understand that this is where the journey should have ended. Yeah, the journey should have ended with him being in good hands with somebody who cares about him, and realizing, you know what, it's about something bigger. Like, I don't need to be on the run anymore.
But like philosophical growth, if you want philosophical growth, go just work a shitty job and just go fucking like deal with people that are going to, sorry, I didn't know if this is a clean podcast or not.
You can do whatever you want.
It's just like, you know, deal with people that are going to mentally like kind of mess you up and get stronger. It's like he just got completely antisocial. It's like he thought he was too smart. Everybody else is wrong.
Exactly.
You know? And I didn't like that about him.
That's the thing, and I don't like it either, but he has the turn and he has the growth when he's writing down in the book at the end of the movie, happiness has to be shared. And I'm definitely butchering the quote, but
no, I know what you're talking about at the end.
At the end, and he has that moment, and that's when you realize he's and it's so beautifully cut where he has that scene is intercut with the Hal Holbrook scene, and then it's also intercut with his family, his mom setting the table for 3.
Yep.
And his dad crying in the street, and Vince Vaughn walking out of jail, and all of the people who he's come into contact with and whose lives he's affected, and he's leaving all of them behind for the last time but it took him that long to finally figure out that he's been wrong the entire time.
Right, but he's just a little brat to me.
You're right. He is a little brat.
But do we know? Do we know in the real story? Did he write that at the end, like in the real? Do we know that?
I think he did.
Oh, okay.
And I believe, and I read the book many years ago, and I forget whether he actually wrote that or not. But I have a feeling that he did.
Yeah,
I have a feel. One of the things that I really liked about this movie, in addition to those scenes, is that you have a lot of narration coming from his sister, and it's a lot of guesswork.
Right.
You don't know how accurate the sister is because she's speaking of her own feelings and wondering what's going on with her brother. But she's getting to a larger point, which is he was on the run, and he was trying to escape this family life that he perceived as, he does have a whole lot of good stuff going for him, and he's got but
if he was like abused or something, like something happened to him where it was like, oh, like now he just doesn't trust anyone in his life and he's got to go, then I'm a little bit more on board. Like someone hurt you, a group of people hurt you, you need to leave. That's a different story, but it just seemed like everything was set up for him, and you can find ways to find yourself without going out and basically committing suicide.
It's a tragic story.
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of like about it. And it's interesting. I haven't really talked to anybody about this movie before. You're the first person who's ever really brought it into my field of vision. And if anybody is looking at this story and thinking, I want to be like Christopher McCandless, then you missed the point.
Yes.
You missed the entire point of the story.
Right.
This is a cautionary tale.
I get what you're saying.
This is not something that people are supposed to emulate. You're not supposed to be the person who's like running out in the world.
But I'll tell you, so this is why I know what you're saying. I get what you're saying, but there is a population of stupid people that see it the other way, and I'll tell you why. So this is why I think I hate this movie.
Hit me with it.
Okay, so I had this friend growing up, Robbie. Okay, we played basketball together, whatever. We lost touch. We ended up meeting back up here. We lived in this house with 25 people in it.
Holy shit.
Yeah, 5 people in a room. I hadn't seen him in years, so we would watch movies and like out in the back and everything with all the people. And we watched Into the Wild. And so we're watching Into the Wild, and this whole time I'm looking at it going, okay, he's an idiot. Why didn't he just do this? He's an idiot. Why didn't he just do this? Why didn't he buy just some supplies? Whatever. While Robbie is sitting 3 feet next to me, tearing up and crying and going, dude, this is literally my story. I need to do this. I need to go. I need to live in the desert. He was literally having epiphanies about how this is who he should be. And I'm sitting there thinking like, Robbie, you have neck tattoos. This guy was a Sandy Hook denier.
What?
He was just such a weird individual.
I didn't realize that Sandy Hook deniers had like empathy and feelings.
He was like too emotional. That's the crazy part. Like he would
God.
He was like a big tough guy, but he would like stare off into sunsets and cry. It was very weird. And so he's watching this movie and he's like, just like getting emotional and standing up and pacing back and forth, and I'm watching it being like, okay, this is where you fucked up, this is where you fucked up.
And you know what? That's the kind of idiot who perpetuates the wrong thing about this movie.
Yeah, and he's also the kind of idiot that perpetuates fucking Sandy Hook being a false.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Of course, yeah.
Like, that's why...
This is a false flag. This story is a false flag, you fucking dipshit.
This is meant to keep people in the social economic structure. And I just...
You know what? Do you think Christopher McCandless would have been a Sandy Hook denier?
Definitely. I feel like Chris McCandless would have been standing outside on the corner of La Brea with a sign saying Jesus is coming and there's chemtrails. Like that's who I see him as.
Yeah. You know what? And it's interesting. I don't know if it is a mental breakdown or not. And that actually would be a really interesting thing to look into more is I wonder what his mental health was like.
Yeah.
I wonder why And that's the thing about this movie is you don't get a lot of answers. You get a lot. There's a lot of questions that are raised by this movie. There's a lot of trying to figure out why he would do something so foolish. I mean, even from the very beginning of the movie, one of the opening scenes is him getting dropped off at the Denali National Park in Alaska by a guy who sees that he's leaving behind his stuff and sees how ill-equipped he is to survive in the wilderness and gives him boots.
Boots. Yeah. How do you not know you need boots in Alaska?
If you're that up your own ass and you're up and you're that romanticizing the idea of getting away from it all, dude, I'm gonna tell you a story.
Tell me.
I was in college. I was in a frat, and I hung out with a lot of bros in college. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And I remember there was one time we were all hanging out, and this was maybe I think it was my junior, senior year, and we were hanging out at one point, and we were talking about stuff, and I was going through an identity crisis, hardcore. This definitely was my senior year, because I remember this is when I was going through the identity crisis
year,
the most.
okay, yep.
Because I was, at that time, I was getting very disillusioned with fraternity life.
In what way?
In the way that it felt repetitive.
Sure.
And I was like, this is all empty. And it doesn't, there's not like, what am I really, this is supposed to be about brotherhood, but what am I really getting out of this?
Crushing beers and playing video games.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a point where I was in a creative writing minor, and I was taking a lot of writing classes at that point. So I'm hanging out with a completely opposite group of people from who I spend 75% of my time with.
Right.
And I started to hang out with these creative writing kids more, and these English majors more, and I would go bounce around between parties, and I felt kind of like a man without a country.
Sure.
And I remember there was one point when I was hanging out with the frat guys. I was hanging out with my bros, and I said something about like wanting to go live in a cabin in the woods by myself and like just write. And then one of them goes, "Why the fuck would you want to do that? That sounds dumb." And I was like, and it hurt my feelings.
Because you had this great like romantic plan in your head.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like, thinking back on that now, I'm kind of glad that he said it was dumb.
Yeah.
Because it is. The beauty of humanity and being in a city like Los Angeles and being in a scene like the comedy scene is that you're around people all the time. And I mean, McCandless got it right, but it took him too long. But happiness is best when it's shared.
Yes.
And you have to be around people in order to really, I think, get all you can out of life.
Definitely.
And it does suck to say that he is a fucking dumb brat idiot kid who didn't understand that. And I wish that he didn't have to go through this journey to figure that out.
Yeah.
I wish that he had taken his desire for wanderlust and joined the Peace Corps.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, do something positive with it. Go to Africa. Here's the best plan. Go to Haiti or Africa and go to a third world country and live like shit over there. Like, live in poverty and realize these things over there. Not just like, you're not helping anyone.
He's not helping anyone.
Yeah.
Not only is he not helping anyone, he's actively hurting people.
Yes.
He's leaving a wake of destruction. The only good decision he makes in this movie is to not have sex with an underage girl,
right,
in Slab City.
And it's like, is that even true? Like, this guy's so impulsive. Like, let's be honest, this guy doesn't make great decisions.
Right.
In the real story, and I'm not trying to slander a man who's, dead and everything, but it's like, come on, would he really say no to that? When's the last time that guy got laid?
I mean, this guy probably knew a whole lot about age of consent laws. Age of consent 16 in California, buddy. Don't try and be on some kind of moral high horse when it's so clear that you are not fucking over the rest of the movie.
Yeah, dude. Or ever again.
Yeah.
He was laying there choking and he was just thinking about it. He was like, oh.
What happened? Where are all the scenes of Emil Hirsch masturbating in the woods? Trying to fuck a goat, a moose neck.
Exactly.
Right? Use a moose head as a fleshlight, Emil Hirsch. Show us the real deal.
Oh my God.
Don't try and be some kind of like monk living in the woods, taking a vow of silence, not talking to anybody. I know that's not, you're not better than that.
You're right. He's not better than anything. And in this whole movie, it's like he has this moral high ground over the whole world. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and he definitely was probably into some weird shit and like had his flaws, but it seems like we paint him as this like rogue, knight in shining armor for himself, and I just don't like that.
Right.
About it.
Now, you said you saw some of this in yourself a little bit, and that kind of scared you.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things about the character of Christopher McCandless that you see in yourself that makes you feel weird?
So I came from a good family.
Okay.
You know, not rich, but like a loving family, you know, and I kind of was good at stuff, and like I was back home and I had a radio show, and like everybody was like, oh dude, you have a radio show, which I basically wasn't getting paid for. It was on ESPN radio in New Hampshire, which was like, you know, no one listened to.
You might as well be setting up a ham radio in a basement.
Exactly. My podcast gets more listens now than that ever did. And so like, I just was like, you know what? I'm going to move to LA. I'm going to leave everything behind and I'm going to move to LA, which was impulsive and dumb. And I think I was having a mental breakdown.
I mean, maybe if you're stuck broadcasting about the vibrant sports scene of New Hampshire, you might be feeling a little restless and like you need to get out of there.
You can only talk about Franklin Pierce basketball so much, you know, but it was just like, so I had that kind of like, I'm going to move away and have, you know, I'm going to go on my pilgrimage. But seriously, like 2 months into living here, I watched this movie again and it made me hate it more. I don't know why. Maybe because I hated it in myself, that like selfishness of leaving everything. But I just was just like, I just couldn't, I don't know what it is that really speaks so much to me. Maybe just the leaving people behind. And maybe I regret that sometimes.
Is there anything after watching this movie that you decided to do differently so you didn't feel like that?
Definitely never isolate myself, like never, and help people. That's the other thing. So like there's a song I love by the Growlers, and it goes, man's never alone if he can offer help. So like whenever I'm feeling my most depressed or like my most sad, or like I feel like I'm having like a mental, like, you know, bad day or whatever, I'll try to like help people. It's like he never tried to really help anyone, did he? I mean,
no.
he mended that marriage, I guess. Right? You know that?
Yeah, I guess.
But like barely, you know? And it's just, he was never helping anyone. He was just sticking to this selfish, holier than thou, have the answers thing. And it's just like
quoting Thoreau at people. Come on, dude.
It might as well be Bukowski. You know, like, you know, there's just, you could be the most well-read person in the world and not go around quoting everything.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know. So, but he's kind of a know-it-all. I'm kind of a know-it-all. You know what I mean? I would say I'm a little bit of a know-it-all.
You don't strike me as a know-it-all.
I try not to be annoyingly, but like there are times where in social, like especially like my close friend group, where I will always try to call the shots because I feel like I know what's going to be best.
Right.
And I have to take a step back a lot of times and be like, let someone else do the thing. Let someone else lead. And he just didn't surround himself with any friends. He kind of abandoned his friends. You know, there's something to be said for forgiving people that don't ask to be forgiven and maybe might not have even done anything to you, but you just forgive them. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Like all of his friends back home, he could have just been like, you know what? I forgive everyone. And it's like he just had this angst at all times.
Yeah.
You know?
He's a man who we can learn a lot from. And I think that the people who do watch the movie, like your buddy with the neck tattoos, they don't get it. They get it wrong. And I'm glad to hear that even though you don't like this movie, you understand the actual point of the movie.
Sure. Well, it's important to just read the subtext of it, even if I just didn't like watching it. You know, like there's just it invoked a certain negative emotion in me where I was just like always questioning it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, but.
Well, on a different note, to sort of wrap things up, is there a movie that you watched, maybe even something early on in that time in the 25-person house, that you watched that made you feel good and made you feel like you were making maybe the right choices, or just something that you enjoyed back at that time?
Back in that day, you know, I watched Waking Life. Do you know Waking
Richard
Life?
Linklater movie?
Yes.
I've never seen it, but I'm familiar with it.
Really good movie. What else did I watch? I watched that movie, It's a Beautiful, Beautiful Life, you know, about the the dad and the son.
Life is Beautiful.
Life is Beautiful. Yeah. It's such a beautiful movie. And just like that brought me emotionally and made me realize that like you have to care for the people that depend on you before yourself and stuff. And, so maybe that's because, I was in such a mindset of like anti-consuming people's emotions and relationships with you and more into like a giving thing.
Right.
And I just felt like he was like a whatever. But anyways, I loved Life is Beautiful. That was a great movie that I saw when I moved out here. And yeah, I mean, dude, I love so many movies. It was when you asked me what movies I hate, the only reason I said this one, it's the only one I could think of that I disliked.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
Because I loved it, and I would not have watched this movie if you didn't say that you hated it.
There you go. Maybe you're pushing you in the right direction.
Maybe. You are now. I get to feel like Emil Hirsch being like, happiness is best shared, and I get to share my happiness with you, even though you feel bad about this movie.
That just made me so happy right there. I think you might have turned me around a little bit on the movie.
You should watch it again.
I will watch it again. Like I said, I hadn't seen it in probably 3 years or so.
Fair.
But yeah, I'm glad we got to discuss why I didn't like him as a person.
Me too.
But and let me bring up one other thing.
Just hit me.
Do you think they were sitting at the table and they were just like, we're going to make this blockbuster movie. It's going to be amazing. It's got award buzz. Let's get Eddie Vedder. Not even Pearl Jam. Let's just get Eddie Vedder. I don't know. That just was, I like Eddie Vedder, but.
You know what? I thought that was going to be a bad part of the movie too, and then I listened and I was like, oh yeah, you can hear the sadness in his voice. Yeah. You need somebody who's sad like that.
That's true. That's a very good point. But well, I'm just glad I didn't come on here and throw up like Mark did.
Hey man, listen, there's only one Mark Stevens, and there's only one man with enough pride in a movie that he can throw up talking about that city.
Unbelievable.
So speaking of Mark, you guys have a wonderful podcast together. You should check out if you're listening. The Loudcast.
Yes, the Loudcast. You've been a guest on it.
I have. It was a fun time.
And you can go on to basically we talk about 3 of the craziest or best or worst stories of your life, and we kind of just dissect them, and it's almost like a therapy session, and that's on iTunes. You can listen to that and watch the Comedy Store Twitch.
Yeah, it's a fun time. And of course there's your social media yourself,
Fake Tom Whalen.
Excellent.
On Instagram, and not to be confused with the real Tom Whalen. It's Fake Tom Whalen, and that's also on Twitter, and AGATS Company on YouTube.
Excellent.
Yes, thank you, Jay.
Thank you. You can follow me at Diet J on Twitter and Instagram, jlightcomedy.com for show dates. And if you like what you're putting down here on the Blockbusting show, give it a rating on iTunes, tell a friend, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. This has been Blockbusting. Go see something good for a change.